Have you ever had the feeling that, at 30, you finally did everything you were told was right, but the money just didn't keep up? You work harder than before, you're more responsible, you earn more than in your 20s, and yet you look at your bank account, your investments, or your financial life as a whole, and feel like something isn't working, as if the promised progress has fallen by the wayside. If this question bothered you right away, stick with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you more than you imagine. Turning 30 often arrives as a phase of life settled. You're no longer a beginner. You understand how the world works. You've learned to fend for yourself. You've achieved a certain stability. And, to an outsider, you're on the right track. The problem is that internally, many people begin to feel a silent discomfort. It's not despair. It's not an explicit crisis. It's something more subtle. A persistent feeling that, despite all the effort, discipline, and maturity, money isn't accumulating as it should. Have you ever experienced this? And that's where the most deceptive phase of financial life begins. Because, unlike your 20s, when making mistakes seems natural, and unlike your 40s, when the consequences become evident, your 30s are lived in a dangerous zone of illusion. Everything seems under control. The bills are paid. The decisions make sense. The choices are considered normal. But even doing everything right, wealth building seems slow, stalled, almost non-existent. Then the question arises that few people dare to ask, why isn't money working in my favor? Many people respond by blaming their salary, the country, the system, or even luck. But the truth is far more uncomfortable, and at the same time liberating. The problem is rarely a lack of effort. Most of the time, it's hidden in common, socially accepted, and emotionally justifiable financial decisions. Decisions that don't seem like mistakes, but that silently impoverish ordinary people over time. The most dangerous thing is that they don't cause immediate pain. They cause delay. And financial delay is difficult to perceive when everything around seems stable. Perhaps you've already thought something like, I'll organize things better later. I still have time. When I earn more, this will be resolved. These phrases sound harmless, but they carry enormous weight when repeated for years. That's exactly why turning 30 is so deceptive. It gives the feeling of leeway, of breathing room, that the future is still far enough away to wait. But the financial clock doesn't work like a regular clock. It charges invisible interest for postponed decisions. What you're about to discover isn't about cutting everything out, living a life of sacrifice, or following miracle formulas. It's about clearly seeing what almost everyone ignores at this stage of life, and, from that understanding, realizing why so many responsible, intelligent, and hard-working people reach their 40s wondering where they went wrong. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, and perhaps as you listen to all this, a specific situation has already come to mind. A decision that seemed obvious at the time, a commitment made without much questioning, a pattern that repeated itself because that's how everyone else did it. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Sometimes a short sentence can help someone who is going through the exact same phase and hasn't yet been able to put it into words. When you share your experience, your doubts, or even your frustration, it transforms this space into something bigger than a video. It becomes a real conversation between ordinary people dealing with ordinary financial decisions. And that's precisely where the strength of this channel lies. Liking the video also seems like a simple gesture, but it signals that this type of content needs to continue existing, reaching more people who today feel confused, stuck, or even guilty for not seeing financial progress, even while doing everything right. And if you feel that this type of reflection is different from what usually comes up when the subject is money, it's worth subscribing to the channel. Not because there's a magic answer here, but because this is a space to talk about what almost no one explains: the behavior, psychology, and silent choices that shape your financial future over the years. When you subscribe, you show that you want to continue this journey of understanding, step by step, with more awareness. Your participation here, commenting, liking, subscribing, is what keeps this conversation alive and allows more people to access this content at the right time in their lives. And now that this 30s scenario is becoming clearer, it's important to look closely at what seems too normal to question, because that's exactly where the next point of this story lies. There's a very specific moment in this phase of life when everything starts to seem too adult to question. Decisions cease to be impulsive and become justified by logic, responsibility, and common sense. And it is precisely there that the hidden truth lies, one that almost no one notices. At 30, many people don't become impoverished by overdoing it, but by normalizing things too much, by choosing what is expected, by following a script that seems safe, mature, and intelligent, but which silently compromises their financial future without making any noise. Organizing life becomes a priority. Improving one's standard of living seems natural, almost an obligation. A slightly larger place, a more comfortable car, long-term commitments that convey a sense of stability. All of this comes packaged with reassuring phrases. Now it makes sense. I deserve it. It's a natural step. And, in fact, none of these choices seems wrong in isolation. The problem is the whole picture. The impact isn't in the act itself, but in the constant accumulation of decisions that increase the cost of your routine faster than building wealth. The human brain loves predictability. It confuses fixed expenses with emotional security. When you make long-term commitments, you create a false sense of control, as if you were on track with your life. But behind the scenes, this rigid structure reduces your room for maneuver. Less flexibility means less adaptability, less room to invest, less breathing room to navigate change. And all this happens without immediate pain, without alarm, without a red flag. That's why so many people only realize it too late. The mistake here isn't wanting comfort, nor seeking organization. The mistake is believing that financial maturity is measured by how stable your life seems on the outside, and not by how resilient it is on the inside. At 30, many people trade transformative potential for predictability. They trade growth for maintenance. They trade future freedom for immediate tranquility. And they do this believing they are being prudent, when in reality, they are just following the most common trend. This is a phase in which right decisions begin to compete with each other. You're not choosing between right and wrong, but between what's comfortable now and what's strategic in the long term. And because the impact of these choices is slow, silent, and progressive, it disguises itself as normality. Life goes on, the bills are paid, the salary comes in, but time passes, and money continues to work harder to sustain the present than to build the future. Perhaps the most delicate aspect of this journey is realizing that no one warns about this. There's no frank conversation about how common decisions can have profound consequences over the years. There's only constant comparison with those who seem to be doing well, reinforcing the idea that you also need to keep up with that pace. And so, without realizing it, many people distance themselves from their own financial strategy, believing they are being responsible. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because once you understand how normality can become a silent trap, it starts to make sense to look more closely at recurring patterns, automatic decisions, and things that seem too harmless to question. Before we continue, leave something in the comments. Write a simple but honest sentence, such as, "That makes sense to me," or "I'm on this journey too." Sometimes, simply acknowledging this aloud is the first step toward clarity. There's an invisible enemy working behind the scenes of your financial life that's almost never mentioned in conversations about money, precisely because it doesn't seem like a mistake. It doesn't appear as impulse, excess, or irresponsibility. It presents itself as adaptation. The moment your income increases, even slightly, and without realizing it, your entire life reorganizes itself to consume exactly that new level. The human brain is extremely efficient at this. It hates excess, hates discomfort, hates the feeling of being below its potential. So it transforms progress into normality with impressive speed. This mechanism is not a character flaw, nor a lack of discipline. It's pure human behavior. The mind interprets an increase in income as permission to expand one's standard of living, not as an opportunity to build wealth. A small adjustment becomes a recurring expense. A bonus becomes a permanent improvement in routine. A new salary becomes the new normal. And when you realize it, you're working more, earning more, but exactly in the same financial place as before. The feeling of stagnation arises from this, not because you haven't evolved, but because progress has been silently absorbed. Behind the scenes of this journey, something even more subtle happens. The brain associates immediate comfort with the feeling of success. If you can pay for everything, maintain your standard of living, and not experience hardship. It understands that everything is all right. But wealth isn't built on the absence of pain, but on conscious decisions that often go against this internal logic. The hidden truth is that the brain wasn't designed to think about long-term finances. It was made to adapt to the current environment and reduce tension now. And this creates a constant conflict between what seems right in the present and what truly impacts the future. That's why so many responsible, organized, and hard-working people feel a strange mental fatigue when they think about money. It's not laziness, it's not a lack of willpower. It's cognitive fatigue from fighting against an internal system that always pulls towards familiar comfort. With each increase in income, there's an invisible fork in the road, transforming it into future freedom or into immediate complexity. Most don't even see this choice happening. It simply happens on its own, guided by habits, social references, and the unconscious desire to feel like they are evolving. When you understand this, something changes. Relief arises. You realize you're not failing alone, nor are you incapable of moving forward. You're facing an invisible game, played within your own mind, where the immediate reward always seems more tangible than the distant benefit. This understanding is powerful because it changes your mindset. Instead of blame, clarity emerges. Instead of self-judgment, better. Questions arise. What decisions are being made automatically? What adjustments seem too small to matter, but repeat themselves every month? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when you begin to see how this pattern forms, it becomes impossible to ignore the accumulated impact of daily choices, silent adaptations, and decisions that were never questioned. It is at this point that the journey ceases to be just about money and becomes about consciousness. And before continuing, write something simple in the comments, just to mark this moment of clarity. It could be, "That makes sense to me," or "I'm on this journey too." Sometimes, giving a name to what was invisible changes everything. There's something peculiar about being in your 30s that makes this phase more deceptive than any other when it comes to money. In your 20s, making mistakes is almost a right. Nobody expects you to have everything figured out. Nobody is surprised when something goes wrong, and the brain itself sees this phase as a learning experience. In your 40s, reality tends to be harsher and more visible. The choices made back then clearly show their effects, good or bad. But your 30s fall somewhere in between, and that's precisely where the danger lies. This decade creates a very comfortable illusion of having plenty of time. The constant feeling that there's still time to fix it, that I'll adjust it later, that when I earn a little more, it will resolve itself. It's a phase where the future seems distant enough not to be frightening, but close enough to serve as an excuse. This combination confuses the mindset and numbs important decisions. The problem isn't the thought itself, but its repetition over the years, always pushing strategic choices to later. Behind the scenes of financial life, this creates a silent pattern. Investments that are postponed because they seem too complex right now. Plans that are put off until next year. Simple adjustments that aren't made because there's no apparent urgency. Everything works, everything goes on, nothing explodes. And precisely because there's no immediate pain, the brain understands that there's no real risk. But the impact doesn't disappear. It just accumulates. And the accumulation is invisible while it's happening. At 30, many people enjoy the comfort of not making any major mistakes, but also not making any truly successful ones. It's a dangerous gray area. Decisions don't seem bad enough to generate fear, nor good enough to generate transformation. They are lukewarm, comfortable, socially accepted choices that go unnoticed precisely because they don't attract attention. But time silently exacts interest on everything that was postponed, especially on what could have been started earlier. This phase is deceptive because it mixes maturity with strategic relaxation. The person is no longer as impulsive as they were in their 20s, but they still don't feel the weight of consequences as they do in their 40s. And this creates a false sense of control. The hidden truth is that many of the biggest financial impacts don't come from major mistakes, but from small postponed decisions repeated over years. Not investing now, not learning now, not adjusting now seems harmless in isolation. But, added together, this builds a deficit that is difficult to recover from. There's also a strong emotional factor here. At 30, comparisons increase with colleagues, friends, family. This creates pressure to appear stable, settled, and on the right track. And often, this need for appearances overrides long-term logic. Comfortable choices are made to maintain an external narrative, while strategic internal decisions are postponed. The result is a financially silent journey, where nothing seems wrong, but something always feels out of place. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding why this decade is so deceptive helps to see more clearly the real cost of delayed decisions and the invisible impact of time when it seems to be on your side. If this resonated with you, leave a simple comment to mark this point in your journey. You can write, "That makes sense to me," or "I'm on this journey too." Sometimes, recognizing this illusion changes the way you look at future choices. There's a small, almost imperceptible mental adjustment that separates those who spend years feeling stuck from those who gradually begin to build real wealth. It doesn't involve formulas, radical cuts, or unrealistic promises. It involves awareness, the way you interpret each daily decision. Because ultimately, what shapes your financial future isn't the rare big moves, but the silent vows you make every day without realizing. Most people evaluate financial decisions based on the most immediate criterion possible. Comfort now. If it fits the budget, if it doesn't cause pain, if it doesn't create conflict, it seems acceptable. The problem is that this filter is too short-sighted. It ignores the accumulated impact, ignores the transformation over time, and ignores the hidden truth that every choice carries a direction, even when it seems neutral. There is no neutral financial decision. There are decisions that push the future a little forward or a little backward. When you start to see choices as votes, something changes in your mindset. A recurring expense ceases to be just an expense and becomes a vote in favor of maintaining the current standard of living. Money that is not invested ceases to be just idle money and becomes a vote against future growth. And at the same time, small conscious decisions cease to seem insignificant. They gain symbolic weight. They gain intention. They gain purpose within the journey. This adjustment doesn't require you to give up everything that brings pleasure or comfort. On the contrary, it requires you to know exactly why you are choosing that. Awareness is not restriction, it's clarity. It's about getting out of autopilot. It's about realizing when a decision is being made out of habit, comparison, or momentary relief, and not out of alignment with what you want to build in the future. This level of attention completely transforms your relationship with money because it removes the burden of guilt and focuses on responsibility. Behind the scenes, this is what differentiates those who always seem busy, always tired, always chasing after something, from those who move forward even without great leaps. The difference isn't in the initial income, but in how the person interprets their own choices. Those who build wealth learn to see impact where before they only saw routine. They learn to question the norm. They learn to pause before repeating patterns that everyone accepts without thinking. This shift in mindset also changes your internal rhythm. Anxiety decreases because you understand that you don't need to get everything right at once. You just need to align your direction. Every daily vote counts. Every small conscious decision reduces noise and increases coherence between the present and the future. And when this coherence begins to form, even slowly, something powerful emerges. The feeling of being in real control of your own journey, not just reacting to circumstances. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when you understand that wealth doesn't come from extreme sacrifices, but from conscious choices repeated over time, it starts to make sense. To revisit common decisions with a different perspective and see opportunities where before there was only routine. If this idea resonated with you, leave a simple comment below to mark the moment. You could write, "That makes sense to me," or "I'm on this journey too." Recognizing this shift in mindset is, in itself, a different vote. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation made sense on some level. Perhaps not as a ready-made answer, but as clarity. And it's precisely this type of reflection that guides everything that happens on this channel. Subscribing is simply a way of saying that you want to continue exploring these ideas, revisiting common decisions with a different perspective, and deepening this journey with more awareness over time. If you feel like it, leave a comment saying so. "This message was for me," or "I'm with you until the end." This helps to show that you followed along this far, and also creates a silent connection with other people who are going through exactly this phase. And if this conversation captivated you, a like is a natural way to signal that, not just to me, but for the algorithm itself to understand that this type of content needs to reach more people. There's a video over here that perfectly complements everything we've discussed today. Click and continue watching, because this journey gets even more interesting when the pieces start to fall into place.